insurance activities with 6.8%, information and communication with 6.6%, and agriculture, forestry, and fishing with 1.6%. Major contributors to the decline were manufacturing with 3.9 percentage points, followed by construction with 2.5 percentage points, and transportation and storage with 2.5 percentage points. On the other hand, contributors to the GDP growth in the second quarter of 2020 were financial and insurance activities with 0.6 percentage point, followed by public administration and defense, compulsory social security with 0.4 percentage point, and information and communication with 0.2 percentage point. On the demand side, only government final consumption expenditure and breeding stocks and orchard development posted positive growth rates in the second quarter of 2020 with 22.1% and 2.2% growth respectively. Meanwhile, durable equipment posted the largest contraction in the second quarter of 2020 with a decline of 62.1%. This was followed by valuables with a contraction of 56.9%, exports of services with a contraction of 43.4%, and imports of goods declining by 42.3%. For the second quarter of 2020, major contributors to the decline were household final consumption expenditure with 10.7 percentage points, followed by construction with 5.5 percentage points, and durable equipment with 4.2 percentage points. On the other hand, contributors to the GDP growth from the expenditure side were net exports with 4.9 percentage points, government final consumption expenditure with 3.1 percentage points, and breeding stocks and orchard development with 0.04 percentage point contribution. The Philippine Statistics Authority appreciates your presence in this second quarter 2020 National Accounts Press Conference, and we look forward to meeting you again on the 10th November 2020 when we report the performance of the Philippine economy for the third quarter of 2020. Thank you very much and good morning.
Thank you very much, Yusek Mapa. Flashed on the screen right now is a link to download the materials for this press briefing. You may also refer to the QR code displayed on the screen. In addition, we remind every viewer that this is streamed live on our PSA Facebook page, and the highlights are tweeted on our Twitter page, PSA.gov.ph. In a few minutes, we will open the floor for questions. Please use the chat box or the raise hand feature to ask questions. Once recognized, please state your name and your organization before asking your question. We now open the floor. From Inquirer, Mr. Bendevera.
Quick recap here. Second quarter GDP contracting by 16.5%, exceeding estimates here. You have a world's median estimate putting second quarter GDP at an 11% shrink, while Bloomberg projections put it at a median estimate of 9.5%. Again, second quarter GDP from the months of April to June down 16.5% year on year. Quarter on quarter GDP is down by as much as 15.2%. A bit of a bright spot here, however, with agricultural output rising 1.6%. But that may actually be the lone sector that's been experiencing a rise here. We have other industries here, in particular, industrial production for the second quarter fell by 22.9%. Services likewise also in the negative territory here, down by 0.8%. This as government spending as well rises by 22.1%. However, consumer spending also very notably here for the second quarter was down by 15.5%. Again, we'll try to get more of the details later on in the show, but let's see how that is going to affect trading, at least for the most part of the day here. As you can see here earlier in the day, prior to the announcement of the GDP figures, the index was pretty much rallying here, extending the two-day rally that we've been seeing here. However, the index local shares have really gone away from those gains. As you can see, paired back those gains, the index now is in the red. It is down 0.1% still, however, at 5,827.83. Let's see how trading will fare, at least as we move on along the day. Yesterday, we did see the index gaining by as much as 1% to 5,833.58. And according to Luis Limlingan of Virginia Capital, it was primarily because investors bought ahead of the second quarter release of the GDP. Chris Mangan of AAA Southeast Equities, however, did say, he saw some selling in the last part of the trade as investors chose to stay on the cautious side ahead of that release. But still, he attributes increases to realizations that this version of the modified enhanced community quarantine for NCR and Mega Manila is less restrictive to businesses than expected. But it's still earnings week. More big guns reporting, starting off with Metro Pacific earnings for the first half slashed by 63%. Now, looking at the figures of how Metro Pacific performed, net income was down, like what I mentioned, 63% to over 3 billion pesos. Core income, likewise, was also down 38% to 5.3 billion pesos. Operating revenues also down to 30.7 billion pesos. That is a decline of as much as 17%. Net income, as you can see, down 63%. That's coming from a base of 8 billion pesos back in 2019. Now, the pandemic really crippling demand and output across all of Metro Pacific's business segments. If you try to take a look at this second chart right here, across all business units of Metro Pacific, they did experience declines, starting off with the power business, which was down 14% to 5.2 billion pesos. That's primarily coming from Meralco and Global Business Power Corporation. At the same time, for their water business, primarily from Maynila, declining as well by as much as 21% to 1.8 billion pesos. Their toll roads business as well, as you can see here, declining 62% to 915 million pesos. Let's start off with the utilities. According to them, their power and water units declined due to weak demand from commercial and industrial segments as stay-at-home measures were put in place. Also, the toll roads business, like what we showed earlier, it's now 915 million pesos. That's as volume in expressways significantly slashed as non-essential travel was prohibited. Light rail as well, badly hurt here. Net loss is due to forced closure of LRT Line 1. Their hospitals and logistics posted consolidated net loss of as much as 128 million pesos. According to our MPIC President and CEO, Jose Maria K. Lim, they are anticipating subdued economic activity for the rest of the year. For now, they're deferring new projects as market changes, especially as they await how tourism and hotel businesses can come back in the future. Let's try to check out how Metro Pacific is performing, at least so far, at the start of Thursday's trade there. As you can see, it is up 2.25%, now priced in at 3 pesos and 18 centavos. That's despite reporting lower first half figures for 2020. For now, we're going to pause for a quick break. We'll try to give you more numbers of the second quarter GDP figure. At the same time, try to give you guys a better look as well as to the corporate earnings for some of the big guns in the local bourse. Business World Live. Business World Live, I'm Jes Delos Santos. Here are other stories we're watching this morning. Agricultural output picked up slightly in the second quarter, but farmers are still bearing the brunt of lower revenue because of rice tariffication. Value production of the farm sector grew by 0.5% in the April to June period from the same period last year. But Circa Director Glenn Gregorio said the uptake must be taken with a grain of salt. He says the agriculture sector should not simply weather the storm, but ensure that it provides enough food for everyone in the long haul. But woes continue for the country's farmers. The Bangko Sentral said rice tariffication took away over 27 billion pesos in revenues from farmers, with the trade-off being cheaper rice for consumers. Farm gate prices for fresh and unmilled palay have fallen significantly and faster than milled rice prices. But the BSP says these are just growth pains, since the production side of the rice industry has yet to fully adjust to the new regime. The lender further claims that the government is implementing support measures for badly affected farmers, including cash payments, highly subsidized loans, and grants of seed, farm machinery, and training support. The Anti-Red Tape Authority will start automatically approving all telco tower permits after 7 days. Completed applications not acted on by local legislative officials after 20 days will also be deemed approved. This is to comply with the Ease of Doing Business law to undergo the bottleneck in the current tower permit process. The 7-day deadline is in accordance with the law's limit for complex transactions. This rule applies to all pending permit transactions with the local and national government. To start the process, the agency has ordered all telco and cell tower providers to furnish a list of pending transactions. ARTA has formed a joint task force with the DILG and the DICT to carry out administrative and criminal prosecutions against officials obstructing permits. While President Duterte has threatened to file corruption charges against LGUs who failed to submit updates to the DILG by Thursday. Recall that during his fifth SONA, the president also promised to shut down telco companies if they failed to improve service by December. And lastly, the coronavirus pandemic may impact usage of major urban transport projects in developing countries like the Philippines. That's according to a study conducted by the Asian Development Bank. ADB noted that despite the ongoing health crisis, developing countries will continue to need additional infrastructure projects. However, it warned that the future usage of urban public transport projects remain to be uncertain, given the unpredictable intensity of the virus outbreak. The bank recommended that sustainable transport projects be promoted to counter the possible shift to private modes of transport. Meanwhile, the Ateneo Center for Economic Research is pushing the government to minimize spending or put on hold all non-PPP transport projects. The group also identified several infrastructure projects with high COVID-19 and viability risks. These include the Unified Grand Central Station, the LRT2 extension, and the MRT3 rehabilitation, among others. Again, the country sinking deep into recession as second quarter GDP contracts to 16.5%. To help us parse through these numbers and these developments, we have Mike Ricafort, is RCBC's chief economist. Good morning, sir. Mike, great to have you here with us on the show.
Hi, good morning, Jes. Thank you for having me.
Okay, what a morning to start, here, Mike. Starting off with, of course, GDP figures here again contracting 16.5% year on year. What to make of those numbers?
Well, this is somewhat expected. We estimated a range of -10 to -15 because that's the height and the peak of the lockdowns. The lockdown started since mid-March, and the earlier MECQ ended in the latter part of May. We only entered GCQ in June. So that's the brunt. Because if you are to measure the effects on the economy of the lockdowns, we have seen, normally as a rule of thumb, for every month of lockdown, that would reduce the sales, the operations, the income of the hardest hit businesses, industries, and sectors by 8% as a rule of thumb for every month. Since practically, well, we had the full month of lockdown in April, and then the first half of with ACQ until the first half of May. Then we have MECQ in the second half of May. So practically, uh, we already lost well, easily in terms of output. It's already around 16%. 16% on an annualized basis. So we have to note that, of course, the lockdowns hit hard Metro Manila, some provinces of Luzon, and other nearby areas, urban areas as well around the country. Some areas in Visayas and in Mindanao as well. So that accounts for all of which, at least 2/3 of the Philippine economy. So,
Mhm.
so not only the hard hit will be those businesses or industries that weren't able, especially that weren't able to operate, especially or they have a lot of restrictions, either that they stop production completely or part or maybe partly they were only able to operate partly. But if you look at the figures also, this doesn't come as a surprise because for the second quarter, looking at manufacturing data, well, we saw that contraction of it ranges between -20 to -40% for the for the 3 months of the quarter, of the second quarter. Meaning the worst being in April. The manufacturing contracted by around 40%. So that's -40%. Then we only had some recovery towards June. It was -20%. But in May, it was -30%. Same goes, and consistently, same goes with exports and imports. We have seen a contraction in exports by -60% in April. It improved a bit to -40% in May. It's still down by about 25% year on year. So there are many other indicators. Even if you look at the OFW remittances, we have seen consistent declines in the high teens, meaning the latest data was -19.3. So therefore, if you put things together, all these indicators, these key indicators for the economy, so it doesn't come as a surprise to see the third quarter to have double-digit declines. However, hopefully this is already the worst. We've seen the worst already prospectively. We have been seeing some improvement, some pickup on a month-on-month basis, which has been taken positively by the markets yesterday. When we saw the exports data, the imports data, the trade deficit, the manufacturing or MISRI. So from the worst levels at the height of the lockdown, we have seen it picking up already a bit. However, since we reverted back to MECQ as of August, so there will be a soft patch again. It would slow down again because the June figures we already saw some improvement in June and well into July, but we will hit a speed bump. There would be some slowdown again in economic activities come August. We'll see if since this will be from August 4 to August 18, let's see, it would really depend on how the new cases would be curbed. So it's really very important to lower that. It would be a function of that. Whatever the quarantine standards would be in the coming weeks, well, would depend on that. So it's really very important to bring down the number of new cases. But nonetheless, that would be, as long as the new cases are relatively high, the cumulatively it's more than 100,000. So that's gonna weigh on economic growth. In fact, even before the MECQ, when Metro Manila and nearby areas were at GCQ, even the economic pickup is relatively slow, even on a year-on-year basis. So therefore, by the third quarter, we might see a soft patch again, a decline in GDP growth. It's still possible, by the fourth quarter to still see contraction. Now, going forward, what would really solve this problem? First is the strict implementation of the health protocols, because there are other East Asian countries who are very successful in bringing their cases, or at least maintaining cases at very low levels. Some countries less than 100 per day. So they would even, some of them might even be alarmed if it reaches above 100. The thing is, they had experience. They had this wealth of experience learning from the lessons of SARS in 2002 to 2003, as well as the bird flu for the past 10 to 20 years, as well as the MERS. So some of the East Asian countries, especially those who were hit hard in the past, have learned their lessons. They know how to live with this. They know how to tackle with this. To the point that some of them didn't even lock down. It's almost business as usual. Of course, they have all the health protocols. No? And the mass transport system remains. But look at their cases; it's relatively low. Look at some of these other East Asian countries. But of course, that looks to be that scenario looks to be the exception rather than the rule, because they have also bolstered their healthcare system, and they are very strict. They have stiff fines if they are violators on the health protocols, on the wearing of masks, on social distancing. And they also implement work from home arrangement. But their other industries continue to operate. So, but it's really important. Look at their cases, it's still low. But of course, there are other developing countries around the world with huge populations experiencing a similar problem. They have high cases because of their relatively high population, relatively high population density. And it's their first time to tackle this kind of problem. There may need to be
How do we make sense of all of this? The country, the GDP contracting sharply at the same time. That puts us in a recession. So what would that imply?
Definitely, we have seen a sharp reduction in business activities. It definitely be a sharp reduction in sales, in income, as well as in wages, in salaries, in livelihoods for both sectors and people in the formal and informal economy. So that would mean, of course, it would lead to, well, with the reduction in sales and income, there would be cost-cutting measures. In fact, we already saw the biggest companies reducing their capital expenditures in response to the slower economic conditions. There's also some chance that some businesses may need more assistance because some of the businesses might even consider either reducing operations or closing down, or either they keep workers or lay off workers. So now that's why we have seen a lot of measures already being brought into the economy. We have seen quite a lot of, especially monetary easing measures. Like we have seen the sharp reduction in interest rates. At least now we have seen in local interest rates at record low levels. Our bond yields are at 2% levels. We haven't really seen this in our lifetimes. No? This record lows. And short-term interest rates are at their 1% levels again. And the BSP overnight rate is at 2.25%. So that's effectively, at least this time around, this is primarily a public health issue. So that's why the economies, not only here in the Philippines, but even in the most powerful countries around the world, they have the luxury of down or locking down economies because the public health issue due to this once in a lifetime pandemic is the penultimate priority, meaning saving more lives is much more important because it's a delicate balance. It's a delicate balancing act in the sense that it's very important to keep the number of cases at a manageable levels because it's a cost-benefit analysis. Through the MECQ now, based on our computations, may reduce economic growth by 1 percentage points. That's equivalent to about 200 billion pesos. That's the economic cost of the 2-week MECQ from August 4 to August 18. But of course, we have to weigh this cost-benefit analysis. It's also very important to curb the number of new cases because at some point the cost may be larger, especially if first the capacity of the healthcare system, and secondly, if there would be bigger cases going forward, there may be, well, for instance, the possibility of longer lockdowns, which would cost the economy more. So it's really that delicate balancing act. That's why we've seen it in the first phase of the lockdown since mid March till May. So it's really that, and everybody else around the world did it. So now going forward, it's really very important to curb that. That's why, well, at least that's the immediate measure to contain the new COVID-19 cases, because that's going to drag economic growth if people are kind of apprehensive or kind of cautious going out, both people and businesses. So that's going to drag economic growth. We have seen it even during the GCQ. So going forward, what would really sustain the gains and the recovery in the economy would be, first, the continuation of the monetary easing measures. So we're not, with the data now, we're not ruling out further monetary easing because the, given the limited funds for economic stimulus. So there's greater onus right now on monetary authorities.
So when do you see this happening? Do you see more policy action, at least from the BSP? When do you see it happening, at least?
Well, it may happen as soon as possible, Jess. Maybe it would likely be in the form of further cuts in reserve requirements, since the Monetary Board has authorized the BSP governor to cut RRR of big banks by another 200 basis points. So that's an equivalent of 200 billion pesos to be infused in the financial system. However, on policy rates currently at a record low of 2.25, that's already further below the inflation rate of 2.7. It's kind of challenging to cut those rates further, but we're not ruling out. It's still possible that given this unusual circumstances, these extraordinary circumstances that would require also extraordinary measures, we're not ruling out further cuts in the policy rates. But fundamentally, under more normal circumstances, it would be kind of challenging to for the policy rates to be way further below the inflation rate. But of course, we have to take that also in relation to our interest rates, comparing it with the other countries. Our interest rates remain relatively high. So even our bond yields, the same goes compared with developed countries, where bond yields are either zero or even negative in some countries. So therefore,
Sir Mike, how do you see things moving forward? I know you did mention you're expecting contraction still in the fourth quarter. When do you see recovery happening?
well, it may happen, Jess. Well, let's see in the first quarter if there will be some pickup already, because mathematically, we are already coming from a low base because of the 2-week hard lockdown in the latter part of March. So come first quarter, we'll be already coming from a low base. But nonetheless, it will be a function of the economic recovery, because at the rate things have been going, even under GCQ in June to July, the capacity of the economy is still relatively low, meaning because of the social distancing measures and the other stringent measures and health protocols, some of the economy and some of the businesses, they operate, say, between 30 to 50%, because not everybody, say, in the workplace cannot be there at the same time. So there may be clusters, or there may be staggered workforces as a matter of prudence, and also taking into consideration the customers or the clients. So that's one. And then secondly, there are other economic stimulus measures, the economic reform measures being prioritized. First, we have the CREATE bill, the reduction in corporate income taxes to 25% from the current 30%, or a reduction of 5 percentage points. So this would come immediately. The earliest that this could be tackled is between this month and next month. But of course, it would really depend on Congress, especially by both the Senate and the House of Representatives, the pace of tackling this. No? So hopefully it will come as early as this year, and it was already mentioned that it is one of the priorities. And secondly, we also have other reform measures like the Bayanihan 2, which may also include some loan guarantees for some of the hardest hit businesses and industries. There are also more capital infusions on state banks like the Land Bank and VBP that would also increase lending to MSMEs, especially the hardest hit sectors. And there's also some proposed financial aid or financial assistance to some hard hit industries. So those are all contained there. So other than that, other than those, we also have increased infrastructure spending. It has been there. It's just a matter of accelerating it because of the high multiplier effects. But the biggest economic stimulus of all is the creative bill, because the estimate infusion into the economy by way of the 5% outright reduction in corporate income taxes right away. It may come, well, hopefully as early as the latter part of third quarter or the fourth quarter. So that's around 42 billion pesos. It's like putting money on corporations. And for the next 6 years, from 2021 to 2027, there will be further reductions in corporate income taxes. Yearly decrements of 1 percentage points from 2023 until it reaches a low of 20% by 2027 for the corporate income tax rate. So for the next 6 years, from 2021 to 2027, the amount of money as a form of stimulus to be infused in the corporations would be around 625 billion. So this is positioned to be the biggest stimulus measure for the country for now. So
a lot standing on those measures that please help propel the economy forward, given, of course, the backdrop of this pandemic. Thank you so much for your insights and your time with us this morning, Sir Mike Ricafort, RCBC's Chief Economist. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jes, for having me.
Again, you have the economy shrinking into recession here after second quarter GDP contracted to 16.5%. And let's see how local shares are performing given those developments here. The index is now up, in fact, rallying 0.4% to 5,856.25. Again, local shares extending, and that two-day rally really that we have been seeing for the most part of the week here. That's despite GDP already contracting by 16.5%. In fact, plunging by the most ever here as the country sinks into a recession. And that's the first look into the business day this Thursday, August 6, 2020. Catch us again tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'm Jes Delos Santos. We are One News.